Welcome back to another episode of the MDCP podcast. Joined by my ever faithful cohorts, Ash and Sam has come out of the baby cave this week. We're excited to have Sam on deck. He's missed a couple of podcasts, but we won't hold that against him. But he has come out today because we are excited to have the one and only EC on the podcast today. How are you?
Very good. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
We're very excited to have you. If you've been in the CrossFit space for more than a hot minute, if you haven't heard of EC, you should get out of the space immediately. Your experience has stretched from coaching to seminars to, starting down your own path with the nutrition powerhouse being as your thing, and through launching 800 gram challenge and other programs. So we want to dig into some of that today, like how you decided, what was your thing that you were the hill you wanted to die on, that you were going to hang your hat on. We talk a lot on this podcast and in this program about coaches finding their niche, because people go, well, there's a lot of people talking about a lot of things. Where do I fit? Like, what's my thing? And there's lots of people, and people can feel a bit lost and feel like the space is very crowded. And I don't want to talk about nutrition. There's a lot of people already talking about nutrition, so why should I talk about it? And those sort of things. So we thought that was you would be a great person to come on and chat about, particularly finding your niche and making it really your own in a very busy space.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I don't know that I have all the answers, but I'll give it the old college try.
So maybe we could kick off if you just give us a quick, the Cliff Notes background of your, entry into the CrossFit ecosystem and that space, and then how you've kind of worked through to where you are now.
Yeah. So I was working in environmental consulting for some time, and I found CrossFit in, end of 2005, just sick of my gym routine. And my brother had actually stumbled into the website when he was coming back from a ACL tear. And he and I always were into athletics. So he's like, you got to check this out. Interestingly enough, he never really formally did it. I'm the one who kind of picked it up, but, sick of the gym routine. So January 1st, New Year's resolution, 2006, I strolled into, I guess it was January 2nd, strolled into CrossFit Boston. Boston was a city that had one of the early affiliates. And that's how I started CrossFit. And those were the years when there wasn't much going on in CrossFit space in terms of like globally or even nationally. What you did if you went to a CrossFit event, the only events that exist were the level 1. So I did my first level 1 a few months later. And started coaching at CrossFit Boston, and I kept showing up to level 1s because, again, people have a hard time like, what were you doing? But there wasn't a games, and there weren't these throwdowns, and you didn't have lots of different affiliates in your state or your country, and so it's like if you wanted to meet other CrossFitters, you went to level 1. So I would just pay my way and go back to repeat level 1s, and so eventually they're like, I think this lady likes this stuff. And so ended up being on seminar staff and eventually transitioning out of environmental consulting full-time 2011, I guess that was, and did a lot of stuff for CrossFit on the training side of the house. And then, CrossFit actually had continuing education requirements for some of our staff, and I didn't know what that was going to do for them. And I ended up just starting a master's in nutrition and functional medicine, and it was interesting enough. And I realized I needed a challenge and a change, that I resigned in 2017 to kind of start my own nutrition thing.
And it's funny how, you can be exposed to all the things, but there'll be just the one thing that you're like, this feels good that I like to learn about it. I'm interested, I'm passionate, and think I can add some value in that space.
Yeah. I mean, I had done a bunch of chem undergrad, and that's a lot of the stuff I liked, more so than the engineering side of the house. So I really liked that stuff. And then of course with CrossFit, nutrition's the bottom of the pyramid, right? So I was definitely involved in our nutrition content, and certainly had a personal interest in it for a long time, and tried all of the diets that went around in the space and did all of the things. And so it was kind of very interesting to kind of go through that, I guess, journey of doing all of the trendy diets. And then after 10 years of that, or whatever it would have been like, oh, maybe I'll actually study this in like a logical way. So yeah, definitely had a personal interest to pick it up, and it fit well with my role at the time. I had no plans on resigning when I started the degree, but then it was just sort of came to this point. It's like, I need to move on to something else. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's an interesting transition to make, because it would be very easy, I guess, to sit in the safe little nest that is, seminar stuff. There's nothing wrong with that, but you could have chosen to go, just say, okay, I'm comfortable here. I can do this one thing over and over. And I'm getting paid, and, my bills are paid, and I get to travel, and it's all amazing. And then you sort of chose the harder route, which is, I'm just going to do branding C.
Yeah. And I definitely, I think I've been pretty open about it on a couple other podcasts. Like, I don't necessarily recommend my path for everyone. And that comes for a couple different reasons, but just kind of closing the loop on the CrossFit side of things. When I came on I've actually started technically for CrossFit in 2006, but that was part-time. So came on full-time in 2011, and they were just growing leaps and bounds. And so Greg had a phrase, or I don't know what you would call it, that he would just tell people that, you'd be training people in your job that you just learned 6 months ago, because the things were changing so rapidly. And that truly was the case, in the sense of, it's like, was constantly new and different things to be working on, and new systems to be built, and how do we scale it? But by the time I left in 2017, and I really enjoyed working in the training department and learned a ton of stuff, I don't want to say it was steady state. Certainly things were still developing. We hadn't gotten out the level 4, which they did. So congrats to them on that. But it was certainly more steady state than my original job. And so that's when I was like, I can't do this same thing for the next X years. So kind of had to level up a little bit.
Do you feel like when you got to that point, it had kind of reached an equilibrium, a balance point, where it was, instead of swinging wildly from drama point to drama point, it was like you could see the horizon ahead of you, and it looked pretty flat?
Yeah, I actually had a meeting with one of my superiors, and I had this really weird kind of, I don't know, those like flashes, dream almost, like we're in the meeting, and I was like, this is the same meeting I'm going to be having in 10 years from now. And it's like, oh, wow. Okay. I got to go, Yeah. And again, nothing against the position or what I had. And I also don't want to say that I need jobs that are just like constantly crazy, but there was just a real interesting role for me that I got to play there. And it was oftentimes taking on some big system or developing a new solution to something that really needed, and I just really enjoy that. I really enjoy complex problems and making them simple. And so I needed that challenge. And I got that in spades. I got that in spades with my transition. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, it can be a tricky transition for people who, people for a long time knew you in this certain sphere and in this way. And then, all of a sudden you're like, yeah, but now I'm just going to focus on this and developing a product, I guess, or okay, well, nutrition's going to be my thing. I'm going to be the best nutrition coach, I guess, that you could be. But, what am I going to offer to people? Like, how is this going to pay the bills? So how did you work through?
That's a great question.
You found your niche. You're like, this is the hill I'm going to die on. This is where I'm at. How am I going to pay the bills with it?
Yeah. And this is why I definitely don't necessarily recommend my path to other people. Because my original intent was to do basically one-on-one coaching. My nutrition degree was nutrition and functional medicine, and I wanted to do nutrition coaching with the functional medicine twist. What kind of medical nutrition therapy can I provide for, autoimmunity or whatever, hormone issues, et cetera. And I think I did that for maybe 2 months and very quickly realized it was not for me. And this was after I had resigned and had no product for sale and didn't want to do what I thought I wanted to do. So that's a stressful time period. And this is why I really recommend for people, like, you have this itch to go do something, especially now, you have the bandwidth and the ability to do a side hustle at almost every job and to try it out and to really get your feet wet before you jump. And I've heard people say, like, it will never be successful until you jump. but there is a level at which you can test things out before you jump.
For sure.
I didn't do that, which, you know, for someone who has, you know, supposedly all this education, not very bright. So very, very stressful. And yeah, I don't even know what happened, but basically I was at CrossFit Roots at the time, worked a lot of different interesting jobs around CrossFit Roots for Nicole Christensen, as well as in the Boulder community, had some connections as I was working on, okay, well, what does this really look like? And what's also equally embarrassing, hell, we're on all the embarrassing stories, is, you know, I had just finished this role at CrossFit where I was designing and implementing courses was one of my main, you know, positions or hats that I wore. And then I spent the next 2 years in nutrition going, well, what do I sell? What do I sell? I mean, I don't know, maybe designing and implementing courses on nutrition, you know, like the fact that it took me a while to really put all the pieces together. Granted, you know, there's some other variables in there that made it stressful and, you know, all that other stuff, but still it's kind of funny that it's like, oh, maybe I'll sell courses. Maybe I'll sell my education. And so that's where I am. Yeah.
And maybe, you know,
they say like the answer when down the road, it's like right in front of us. Like, how didn't I see that? But a lot of the times it's like, we're the ones that have the hardest time seeing what we should be doing. Everyone around us can see it clear as day, but
yeah. And you need, like, the thing about the courses is the course space is highly saturated and there's lots of people selling courses. And so to some degree, you know, you can say it was silly for me not to have done anything earlier. I just didn't have the audience, you know, like you need time to build the audience. And so all of that time, as much as I laugh about, I have no idea what I was selling and doing, which is partially true. Part of it was growing the audience, right? Which you need. And I still am working on that every day.
Well, and that's, I mean, that's a huge hurdle when I know when coaches talk about, and we talk to coaches at varying levels about transitioning out of whatever role they're in, their safe little, you know, comfortable nest, and into this role of entrepreneurship, creating an audience, creating a message, creating a brand, and the flipping relentlessness with which you have to do that. One of the things that you have been so good at for so long now is that regular, consistent cadence with which you're putting out information. And it's sometimes it's entertaining, sometimes it's, you know, a little bit more clinical. How, like, what was that transition into that process like, and how long? I'll ask the first question first. What was that transition into that process like for you?
Slow. Not impressive. Yeah, I mean, you know, again, you hear all these recommendations from people that are these content creators, and they're like, every platform and 5 pieces of content a day. And I mean, some of it is like, you don't even know, you know, graphic design tools or video tools or editing skills or whatever it is to kind of come up to speed on that.
Right.
Let alone just finding your voice and what you want to say. So I think I started on Instagram merely because I felt like that was the space where most CrossFitters were. I think it was just a bias because that's where I was, but that's where I do think they still primarily are as a group. And so I just started there and kind of have followed on some other platforms. But yeah, it was just sort of like, you know, I didn't really have a business plan. I didn't have much of a product. So I was like, well, let's see what resonates. What do I want to say? What would I say? And just sort of started posting. I mean, it's really a not impressive business plan.
But it's
go on, Sam.
Well,
no, you go, Sam.
That notion of just start. Like at some point, you don't have to use your words earlier, you don't have to jump in with both feet. You can start with a side hustle. You can, you know, dip your toe in, and you don't have to commit, but at some point you do have to do something, you know, and even if it misses wildly, that is not necessarily indicative of the overall success long-term. But if you never stick a foot in or stick a toe in and never begin the process, you know, whether it's now or 10 years from now, never is still nothing.
Totally. No, totally. Yeah. I mean, there's huge lessons there in those early years. I joke about, I mean, I'm not like I'm so advanced now, but oh my gosh, it feels like such an uphill battle during that time. But that was a lot of it, finding my voice. What am I saying? You know, even the 800-gram challenge was one of the earliest things I launched, partially because I pretty much had that idea formed at the end of my master's and was playing with it. But still, you can think an idea is great and it doesn't do very well in the market. So you have to spend all this time. And then it's funny, you think you've said it once. And so you're like, oh, I'm done. Or at least that was my initial thought. When in reality, you have to say your message over and over and over again. And so that was some of the learning too. It's like, oh, wow, there's still all these questions, So yeah.
Were you still hoping to reach like on a medical level when you started on Instagram and like trying to find a new audience? Were you still hoping to implement some of that information, or were you like you wanted to move away from that?
No, and I guess that's a good thing point I left out was when I first started with the one-on-one coaching, what I realized was how lacking in the basics everybody was.
Yeah.
And so it was like, even if I wanted to do these specific supplements for some GI condition or whatever it was, I still needed the people to eat more whole unprocessed foods in the right quantities. Like it was just like step one and nobody was past it. And so I was like, heck with all this specificity. I mean, this is silly. Like, let's cut to the chase. And so again, you could look at that as a failure of like, oh, I tried a business idea that I didn't want to do. But ultimately, that's why I came down on finding my niche of like, everyone's overlooking the basics. There's very few people out there that are really doing the basics well. And so ultimately, I pretty much dropped all of that. Like I am a licensed nutritionist and I can do medical nutrition therapy where I am licensed, but I don't. Because again, it's just like so many people need the basics. And so I'm like, that's what I'm just going to hammer on.
I have lost track of the number of times I have passed along one of your carousel slides on Instagram of your 10 principles of nutrition because they cut to the heart of the matter. And we talk about, in CrossFit, the big rocks, your training, your nutrition, your sleep, the things that are going to move you the furthest. Well, if we niche down into nutrition, I found it hard to find a more succinct list of things that are going to be so effective as those 10 points. And to your point of, sure, there's the super uber specific stuff, but nobody's doing the regular stuff really well.
Yeah.
And if, it's like coaching and cueing, 99% of the time, jump harder and punch is going to do it, and you don't need to have, 100 different cues. Except for maybe 1% of the time.
I think that people also, when they're trying to find a niche, is like, well, I need to be the expert in this field, so that they get into overcomplicating it so that they feel like that they've got the biggest brain. Therefore, why wouldn't everybody want to work with me? But really, it's the same. I mean, I guess when you become a new coach, you want to, word vomit over the first client you've got about an air squat for an hour and a half and change their life. But it's really about, yes, this is my niche, but how do I make my content and my message unique and relatable rather than overwhelming to people? Because like you said, nutrition is very overwhelming as it is, let alone, people don't need any more reasons not to eat more broccoli and drink more water.
Right.
Well,
yeah, I mean, that's super. There's lots of different points in there. I mean, the first one is about the niche. It is hard. Like even one of the things I deal with in marketing all the time. I mean, I've worked with a few different marketing coaches and businesses, and they're like, EC, you've got a niche. And I'm like, I don't need a niche. And they're like, no, you got it. But it's true. Like people respond to very directed ads, even though my program is good for weight loss, health, and performance. People don't believe it if I try to say it all. Right. So it is interesting how even though the programs are the same, like niche marketing does work. And so I totally get it from a business perspective of why people are like, I'm only working with women 40 to 42. It's like, hey, niche down, because then you're going to start finding who's actually going to say yes. So keeping it broad is hard for sure. But yeah, I mean, and to be perfectly honest, some of all the noise in the space actually helps me. Having so many people doing all these different things to now be able to come in and offer, hey, look, this is the similarities across all of what you're seeing. And that's a lot of what I do. And that's what I try to do with the principles. And to be perfectly honest, I mean, this is how it's really interesting to see how part of your life come together. I mean, so much of what I teach is heavily influenced by CrossFit. I mean, CrossFit is not Fran on Monday and 5x5 back squats on Thursday. It's constantly very functional moves at high intensity. Those are the principles. And then how you execute them is CrossFit. And so what I did with nutrition, in my opinion, was to come up with these underlying principles. And then maybe you enact it. Maybe your Fran and back squat combination is low carb. And maybe your combination is keto. And maybe your combination is my 3 pillars method or my 800 gram challenge. but ultimately, like, let's understand the guiding principles before we move forward. And so I think I've had, I don't know, some success, partially because other people want to niche down so much. Because then people would be like, I don't get all these differences. And I'm like, okay, there's not that many differences.
Right.
Almost my niche has been created by other people wanting a niche, which I guess, thank you for that, everyone.
I have to say, like, I'm geeking out a little bit and trying to rein my excitement in. So I have an autoimmune disease, and I was able to get it in remission twice with nutrition.
Oh, cool.
So I'm super passionate about nutrition as well. And people come to me for a number of different things for nutrition. And I think the most exciting thing is exactly what you said, is the basics. As long as you understand the foundation, you can do it you can do it a number of ways, and one might work for you and one might not. And that's what makes it so beautiful. And just like CrossFit, you know, like, and I find it really, encouraging that you don't necessarily have a niche. I mean, yes, the 800 gram challenge is definitely where, like, that's where I think a lot of your name is known, but you don't, because you can be used for everyone any which way. And I think that's what makes it beautiful.
Yeah. Well, thank you. You know, the 800 gram challenge is definitely kind of my intro product, because so many people are just looking to get started and they want a quick tip. And it's like, you know, I love the 10 principles, but you're not going to talk to somebody on like day one of nutrition, like, let's go through the 10 principles, you know, like it just is so unrealistic. Like, I love it from the theory and you know, education side of the house, but that's just, you know, so 800 gram challenge is sort of that first step for people to get their foot in the door with eating more whole foods. Yeah.
So what led you down the path? And, you know, we talk about, you know, so you've created this thing, you go like, okay, I'm going to do the nutrition thing, and here's my first offering. And then go, okay, well, I need to now give people something to ascend to, which is, you know, what you've done through pillars and like the lazy macros. How do I, you know, you could sit back and go, well, I'm just the 800 gram challenge chick, and this is what we're going to do, and I'm going to sell it to every CrossFit gym that wants it, and that's going to be cool. But you've developed a way for people to ascend if they want to, for additional knowledge or layering on complexity. How did you come about getting to that point of going, we need something more? Was that more market driven? Was that you going, well, I'm doing this, but I also know all this other stuff as well?
Yeah, again, not a really well thought out procedure. Generally, I think it was more, it was almost like realizing that there was such a gap in where I could help people understand nutrition. Like, I was like, just almost like a disconnect for me of like, oh, well, how would I write a whole program about the 800 gram challenge? And then I was like, oh, because people have all these questions about it. And so I was like, okay, their questions drive the program creation. Right. And then, you know, soon after the 800 gram challenge came out, all my CrossFit athletes were, well, this is nice, EC, where's the protein? I was like, oh, right. Okay, I guess I do have to talk about that. And then you put out some protein standards, and then there's like a slew of questions about them. And so it was almost silly that I didn't even think about it myself. And so it was just more of the market. And then it's like, well, this isn't really everything about nutrition. And in fact, I probably wrote the principles, probably order of operations. The principles kind of started before the 800 gram challenge. But so then it was sort of like, okay, well, I guess I have to explain these things in depth, longer than an Instagram slide. And so then it was sort of like, okay, well, then what does the process really look like for me to take someone through on diet? And I had done that with some one-on-one clients, even after I started my own thing. And so then eventually that came into the masterclass. So it really was probably crowd driven, and just listening to all the questions and being like, oh, I guess that is a course, you know? So again, not a very impressive planning strategy there, but more just sort of putting something out there, reacting to it, and then seeing how that could be made into a product. Yeah. And I did have to say that I do benefit or benefited, especially in the early times. At that time, I was still at CrossFit Roots. I had a tremendous support from Nicole Christensen, and could do things like run challenges with her groups or run whatever I kind of wanted to there, and kind of bounce ideas off of her as well. Yeah.
And so what you're saying is networking is important.
Yes.
But it's also, you know, you say that it's, you know, not the smartest or the simplest path, but really, you know, when we talk about CrossFit, it's, you know, brutally elegant is, you know, the most devastating workouts are the ones that are the most simple. Like, Tony and I did an episode last week with Austin and still talk about his box jumps deadlift workout, which anyone, if you've done that, then you're going to hate your soul for doing that. But 2 movements doesn't get much more simple, like 21, 15, 9. It's very simple. They're we've all written a workout that's been super overcomplicated, and then you get to the end and go, I don't know if anything was achieved by doing that. But, your approach of just, this is what the market wants now, and going, how do I answer those questions? Like, people are coming to me, so I can't answer them one by one. How am I going to develop a course, which is, clearly going back to your strengths of like developing coursework and that sort of thing. So I don't think that you give yourself enough credit for having such a simple, elegant solution to something that is very complex for people and overwhelming for people at times. So I think that that's something for you to, I guess, give yourself credit for.
Well, thank you. I do also, I've told this story before, but I'll bore you with it again. I worked in environmental consulting for years before CrossFit, and we worked on environmental litigation cases. So who pays to clean up pollution now? And so I helped prepare an expert witness to go to stand trial. And these were very high profile cases, lots of money being transferred. And my boss was phenomenal. And I think if I have any clarity in the space, it's because of him, because he would constantly be drilling down to like, what's the main point? What do we have to get across? Because you're trying to convince a jury of maybe 12 people who have never thought about environmental contamination in their life of where millions of dollars are going to go based off of scientific data. And so he was so good at, I distinctly remember one of my first like summaries I gave him was about 2 pages long. And he looked at me and was like, what is this, a mystery novel? And it was just like, get to the point, get to the point, get to the point. And so he was very instrumental in now and how I think about things. It's like, okay, the person who never thinks about this, they're a lawyer, they're a music teacher, what is it? How can I make this so that they understand what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Like relatable for the average person. Yeah.
Totally.
So it's not another language.
Well, and not just that, and I hate to use this word again, but I'm not going to be able to avoid it, but a first principles approach to understanding something and then to communicating it, not reductionist, but eliminating and separating wheat from chaff, Yeah.
And you've spoken before, EC, and we touched on it briefly about, finding an audience. So getting, people to hear you. And I know that you've spoken, as my dog tries to break into the door, you've spoken before about not being very comfortable necessarily being forward facing on the socials. And, hearing your own voice and putting that out there. How did you get yourself, and that's something we hear a lot from coaches in the space. They're like, I don't want to talk on video, and Ash is feeling attacked right now, but just putting himself out there. That's 2 weeks in a row, Ash. How did you sort of get past some of that feeling? Because like having followed you for a long time and seen your socials evolve, the stuff that you put out now is entertaining, it's relatable, it's real, but and incredibly funny at times as well. And when I see you do things where you've put a wig on or you're doing the thing, I'm like, this is so not EC when she started and was not comfortable with that. How did you make that transition?
Yeah, some of it is just the recognition of the platform you're on. I think about Instagram as like just a really, really loud concert, you got to be really loud. You got to be really loud. And like, I don't want to say no one cares. Like people care and they read my stuff and they respond and they engage with it. So there certainly is care there and interest there. But like you have to get a lot of attention and a lot of traffic to have people be interested in what you're doing. And you can think you put out this post and it's so embarrassing and people don't think about it for longer than 3 seconds. It just is, it's just gone. There's too much content. There's too much other things distracting them that you're such a blip on the radar. It does not matter. And that's what you kind of have to, and you kind of start seeing that too. Like I was saying about the questions is I'll get questions and I'm like, I already answered that. And you're like, right, there's a lot of people out there, right? It's not one person I'm talking to. There's thousands and thousands, and we're all in this large concert screaming over other creators. So
Yeah.
you got to be loud, you got to get out there, and you got to just keep saying your message over and over again. I think you just kind of get used to that. And you, again, see it with sales too. You have to be like, well, do I want to sell a product? I got to be loud. I got to have people want to listen to me.
You said something earlier when you were talking about marketing, and I want to go back to this because had I not spent the time with Fitfiliates learning so many things that I have in the last year, it would have blown over my head and been like way beyond something I could comprehend. And I have a feeling that a lot of coaches are in that same position where we know the points of performance for the air squat, but we have no idea about any of these basic principles of entrepreneurship or business or anything like that. And so you use the term niche marketing, right? So at what point in this journey, you're creating content, you're playing with things, you're pulling the levers on the platform, you're being loud, you're being funny, you're doing all of the things. At what point did you figure out that, one, that it would be important to have some other kind of input, like you needed to bring in another human being or to get a mentor or something like that? And when you did so, what did it look like?
I think I brought in mentors as early as possible. And I don't even know how they came to be. It was either taking different courses. I think I did a few different business courses, and as well as a few different business coaches. And I don't know how I got linked up to them. I would have to go back and look through them all. And it's just because in the beginning, you just realize you don't know anything. And so you're like, well, I don't know, this person knows more than me, so let me go with that person. And so I would say it was, I don't know if serendipitous is the word of how I kind of came across people to reach out to at time and give different guidances at time. And like I said, I did a couple different courses, business courses, and I did a couple different business coaching setups. And I think like most things, you learn something with every evolution. Like there's never this one moment in entrepreneurship where you're like, now I've made it.
Right. You don't even want to say those words out loud.
Now I have it figured out. No. Like it's always like that next kind of step. And in fact, Kelly Starrett, who's been very supportive since the beginning. Yeah. And we've been friends for years over the CrossFit years. And he even said that to me just super early on, not as like a guiding coach type of thing, but I forget what happened. It was something with the 800-gram challenge. He's like, oh, just another feather in the cap. They just add up over time, and that's just really how it is. There's never this moment where you're like, and now I am doing really well. It's just like this constant push forward. And I know that's a really long answer, but it's sort of like, I think that's a good thought process for people on the journey, because you can sign up for this business coaching course. You're like, and now I'm going to have the perfect funnel, or, now I'm going to have like the perfect copy. And maybe you do end up making like a better funnel or better copy, but you never have like the whole business, like all I's dotted, T's crossed. Yeah.
Well, and I think it doesn't matter that it's a long answer. It's the right answer. And understanding, and I'm going to quote Glassman now, that it's a process, not an endpoint. It's that paradigm shift. It feels like it. If I was to try to explain it to myself a year ago, it'd be like, you have to understand this sooner and really embed it deep in so that you get comfortable doing the work daily rather than looking for the success daily.
Yeah. Don't look for the success daily.
But it's the same. No one gets a 300-pound snatch. The first time they walk into the gym, it's all their muscle up. It's progressions, and it's just doing the small work and the progression work. And I think that's part of the skill of being, and why we're called to be entrepreneurs is and develop our own thing, is because we're not happy to just settle, well, I've got the one thing, that's it. That's going to be, you're always looking for the next thing. And that's part of the magic of it, rather than being someone who goes, well, like I said in the intro, you could have sat comfortably doing seminar stuff and writing courses and doing the thing, but you're like, I want to do more. I know I can do more. So I need to find something that fills that gap. Whereas a lot of people don't act on that. They kind of go, yeah, but it's safer and warmer over here, and I don't like the unknown. And that's the difference, is the people who make the step or the people who don't.
Yeah.
And then do the work. It's like, oh, well, geez, that sucked. Because I'm quite sure that all of the ideas of things that you had to put out, not all of them have been a raging torrent of success. You're like, that didn't work.
Yeah. There's been a few of those for sure.
Yeah. And that makes your other products then better and more robust, because you're like, okay, what did I learn from that?
Mm-hmm.
And how can I do it better next time?
Totally.
So it's about taking that learning. And, you know, it was a very good point you raised, and Sam retouched on, is about having mentors and people to guide you along the way, and not being afraid to put up your hand and go, well, I don't know all the things. I'm just going to ask somebody who, you know, we speak a lot about this, is find that aspirational identity, and that, well, who's doing the things that I want to be good at, and what are they doing? And it doesn't mean a carbon copy of them, but it's like, oh, well, they get up at 5 a.m, they write, they, you know, do this, and they set aside time for the, okay, now I'm going to have a morning routine and I'm going to do the things. Is what makes them successful. Okay, I'm going to try and replicate that.
Yeah, I would add a tweak to that, because I do hear that often and I agree with it a lot. The part I kind of caution people about, because I think I stumbled over it a few times, is like, nobody knows your content and your message better than you.
Yeah.
So how you're going to sell and package that, that's you. You got to figure that out. Now, you can outsource the email marketing guy who knows, you know, how to make the open rates better and whatever. And you can help. Like, I have somebody who works on the Facebook ads, because gosh knows I'm off that platform, or, you know, don't get involved with that.
Yeah.
But like, what's the actual product and the message? That's you. That's really you. There's no outsourcing that, because I know there was times when I would be talking to my business coach about like, what's the product look like? And is this a valid product? And can I sell it for this value? And it's just sort of like, they don't know. They don't know it better than you do, you know?
Yeah.
And that comes across too, when you're not being, you know, if you were to outsource a lot of that stuff, then that's not your authentic voice. And, you know, where we try and encourage coaches through our programs is, what's your voice? So, you know, it comes back to not doing a carbon copy of like, oh, this is what a successful coach does. It's like, well, how does this apply to me, and how do I make it work for me in my words of voice, rather than going, yeah, I'm just going to reshare EC's reels and go, yeah, what she said, but reach out to me for more tips. You know, it's
totally.
We don't want to, you know, people pick up too on that, whether you're just recycling something, because you can read two things from a page, and one can be something you've written versus something that someone else has written. And even subconsciously, there will be very tiny changes in the way that you do it that people pick up on, that's not you, that's not your voice.
Totally.
Or conversely, there's the notion that, you know, as wide as EC's audience might be, I'm going to have a different reach. And if I'm doing the work that I need to as a coach to learn on behalf of my audience, I can take the important details that she talks about, and I can give credit where credit's due, but I can present it in a format that doesn't include resharing content. I can talk about, you know, EC Synkowski says blah, 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 and so says blah, 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 and you can present the synopsis. And so you can provide a unique spin on something. And because my circle and EC circles, they might touch in some ways, but I know for a fact that there are a lot of humans I know who've never heard of you. No offense, you know.
Okay.
and like, that doesn't mean they don't need that information.
Yeah.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
Or ways that, you know, I know, Sam, you and I have talked as well. Like, you know, you will present something on coaching different to how I would, but, you know, necessarily people who listen to me may not understand, you know, when you can get into the weeds on stuff versus a different way of explaining it. And it's, you know, learning to, and like you said, EC, like if we use Instagram as an example, it's one large concert. So you're talking to many thousands of people that you don't know are there. So you need to make sure your message is, like you said, understandable at the lowest common denominator. That, you know, that the most people can understand that in that message. Because if you try and make your messages, you know, too specific, then you're only going to hit this much of the audience,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to lose, your message will be lost in the sea.
Definitely. Yeah, for sure.
Go on, Ash. Sam, not Ash. Sam.
You could have called me worse things. So as you've made this, you've dumped a lot of time and energy into doing all of the things that we talked about, right? So like, there's figuring out who the hell you are and what your voice is and what the hell it is you want to say. And then how do you say that? Is there a better way to say that? How do I say that and create a product? Is this the right product? Is this version of the product the right product? Like, you've had a lot of iterations. If you were to take everything you've experienced and not negating the journey itself, because there's value to the journey and to smashing your face against a wall. You have to do that sometimes. But if you were to take your experience and then to go back in time to your younger self at the beginning and provide one or two pieces of information to save the most unnecessary face smashing, what would those things be?
Yeah.
Great question.
Yeah. I actually said this on another podcast recently, and people told it to me and I just didn't listen. Email list. That's when people buy. You can get them on social, you can get their attention, but building your email list, I think, is big. It should be a big focus and a priority, and to get people there. And I'm even now just working on ways to improve that off of my website, which I think, thinking back, it's just like how many people have visited my site and had no clear way to sign up for the email list. Right. I mean, okay. Okay. So there's that. That's definitely a big one. Some of it too, I think, is just, I don't know if I necessarily did it wrong. There's a couple times that I kept switching platforms for features, which are an important part of my masterclass experience, because I want to make sure that I have kind of a group environment that's like Facebook, but also deliver content. So I don't want to say that all of it was lost, but I do think you can get caught up from a business perspective of features when people aren't really buying a course or a product because, I don't know, the download button is more clear, or I don't know, pick your thing of choice, or the onboarding experience is that much more superior than the other platform. Obviously you have to welcome people, but you know what I mean? Sometimes I think we can get so lost in these details of oh, this one has better video quality. And it's that's not why people are buying the course. They're buying the course because they want to work with you and they want to experience a transformation. Right. And so I do think there's probably, if I had to add it up over the 5 years, at least 6 months of this time on stuff that was just why, of switching platforms and the tech background, that was just this is fine. This is fine. The audience is here for you, not for, again, some technology feature.
Interesting. And to the email list, so that you've got a lot of hats that you're wearing now, right? So there's the courses, there's the social media content, there's the email marketing content. Knowing how important something like an email list can be, how much of your time and attention is focused on content generation for that kind of thing?
Yeah, there's some other things in there too. There's the podcast, there's my affiliate program, my affiliate resources. And do all of these things become pieces that serve to fill that email marketing bucket? No, the email marketing bucket is just like my Instagram bucket, in the sense of, what do I've got on top of my brain today to talk about? Yep. Thankfully, some of that comes from questions. And so as I get questions from my email list, that provides fodder for the email list, and or some podcast content or Instagram content. Again, the community sort of drives the way that I go. Nice. I would say that I don't spend an inordinate amount of time working on the email. I put time into it, but that is an individual piece, not that high, because I only do one email a week. There are some people that do, 3 emails a week or whatever else. My cadence is 1 a week, and that's the best that I can do with my other stuff. And so time on that individually is not that high. I would probably say, though, if you just want to talk pure content, either that's podcast or social media or just the other resources that I developed through my courses or programs, I don't know, at least 50% of my time, possibly 70% of my time. It's constant.
Is content creation,
it's
which
content.
For all intents and purposes is marketing.
Yes. Yeah. But at least 50% of the time. And I do have help on like podcast editing, but podcasts, you know, topics and notes and all the other like pure content, it's at least 50% of my time. Yeah.
That's really important for people to hear, I think.
Yes. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
It's like, you know, we see, I think of, you know, the flashy, and I think frankly of some of the things that you do, Lisa. You're amazing with these little bits. I hate video editors. I'm so horrible with video editors, and I'm constantly flipping back and forth between platforms and trying to get comfortable. Whereas I see some of the stuff that Lisa does, and she just like chop, like everything looks beautiful. And I'm like, why isn't there a button I can press to do that? And the amount of time that I know she spends on something like that is, of course, much higher. And the effect that it has in order to being in terms of like being able to reach someone and being able to convey a piece of information, or you know, in terms of being leveraged, you can take one piece of content, chop it up 10 different times, and now you've got 10 pieces of content. Like, that's a high ROI operation to invest in something like that.
Yeah. And that's something people can work on the side. That's sort of what I mean too. Like, I think, you know, you can look at Instagram and you can be like, oh, somebody just takes pictures, and you're like, even people that are just, you know, aesthetic based influencers, that requires a lot of time. Even quote, just photo type pretty things. It's a lot of time. And so I think there's some of that stuff that you can experiment with, including the video creation, including just the reels or whatever you want to say, see where you get engagement and be like, oh, that's a lot of time for a 2-minute clip.
And, you know, you can, how many times, and I know that this has no doubt happened to you, EC, because I know it's happened to some of the content that, you know, I've produced for Fitfiliate, is like, this is a killer clip. And you go out and it goes 63 views. Right. And then, you know, Ash, who is very much not in love with social media, does a reel last week, and we're currently sitting at nearly 2,000 views, where she's just talking about a guy that we interviewed on the podcast, and that was it. And it's no particular hashtags, no particular thing. And Ash has just, you know, talked and been authentic, and you're like, it's our most viewed piece of content. And you're like,
I think that was probably, that was a one and done video. That wasn't you know, I just recently did some stuff for handstand work, and it took me a half hour just to get the right freaking pictures, and then another half hour to do the editing to make a little collage picture, and that's it. And it's one little post. But like that got so many views was just like, I was rethinking about our talk with him, and I was like, I just got to say this. And that was it.
And we can get, and you know, like you said, EC, and I've done it too with some stuff I was creating for my mindset coaching stuff, is, oh, this platform's not great, and you know, oh, I want this other platform, I'm going to change to this one. When, you know, when I sat down and thought about it, am I changing the platform for me or for them? Has anyone actually complained about the platform? No. Okay,
totally.
Cool. Then maybe I should probably not be creating. Is it a problem, or am I making it one? But also with the socials, it's like, you can, you know, you do need to put in a certain amount of care and attention, but not get bogged down and going, oh, well, that reel's not going to make it because the lighting's not quite right on my, you know, left temple or whatever. It's, you've just, like, no one hates seeing themselves on the screen more than me, which is ironic given my career path. But, you know, if I sat there and looked at every minuscule thing as I was editing it, then nothing would go out.
Totally.
You know, nothing. So you can have some care and diligence, but you don't want to get stuck in the perfection, because sometimes the most imperfect things will get you the most leverage. Like I said, you'll create something, go, this is amazing, I love it, and your mum might have watched it, and that's about it.
Totally.
So we, you know, one piece of advice, I guess, is that we, you know, just send it. And I guess, you know, if you know, even though you downplay, I guess, the way that you've gone about things and wound up where you've arrived, like, you know, quite ecologically, there's been a lot of power in that for you is like, well, I'm just going to do it. And you may look back and go, oh, there's some things I would have done better or differently, or maybe I needed this, but just taking action.
Yeah, no, it is cool. I mean, I don't know where this is all going completely, obviously. But it is nice to be like, yeah, you kind of just put one foot in front of the other and you kind of kept going, and yeah, it's definitely grown and it's continuing to grow. And so it's exciting to see. Yeah.
Well, that kind of answers my next question. I guess last question was, you've got the masterclass, you've got the 800 gram challenge, you've got some fantastic products. What's next? Like, what's the, like, looking ahead, like, what's your next thing? Like, what's the next checkbox that you see needing to be checked?
Yeah. So through my masterclass, I also have an affiliate program, which kind of works like the CrossFit affiliate, where people can come on and become a coach and use my programs and methodologies and resources to use with their clients. And so I see that growing. And I also would like a technological solution to scale my product and programs better. So definitely working on that. I don't know. I hope next year I can start some of the development on that.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up, EC, where can everyone find you if, as I said at the start, they've been in the space but don't really know anything, but suddenly talking about your nutrition stuff and they're like, oh, I need to find out more. Where can we find more about what you're doing in your projects and people can connect with you?
Yeah. OptimizeMeNutrition.com. Same handle, Optimize Me Nutrition on Facebook and Instagram. And then the Consistency Project is my podcast.
Perfect. And I will put all of those in the show notes, but thank you very much for your time today. We've appreciated your honesty and your insights. And I know it was a little bit different, I guess, to what you would normally get asked on a podcast about, but we thought that your journey was particularly interesting and something worth sharing and discussing. So we appreciate you, and we look forward to having you back again soon as well.
Yes, thank you so much. No nutrition questions. This was very different. Had a lot of fun.
I was very conscious about that. We're not going to go down that rabbit hole. It'll be very easy going, I've tried this, but no, we really wanted to focus on your journey as a coach, finding a voice in the marketplace and in the ecosystem, and seeing how that you can do that. But again, like every person that we've had on, from, Pat Barber, we had Zach Cadix last week, it's about putting in the work. Like you're not just going to post a reel and suddenly you are Joe Rogan. It's
that would be
put in the work.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.